Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Takeoff Podcast. We're fired up to be with you today, and this is probably the first guest, and there has not been any other guest like this one on this show. When I introduce this guy, we're talking about an author, NFL stadium announcer, career coach, and basically a communications expert. And guys, we're going to jump right into this. And Matt, how are you doing today?
Wow, that's quite a buildup. I should have given. Wonder what would happen if I gave you an extra $5. This could have been a lot better.
Oh
No, I'm
man.
everything is going fine, Jake. I'm happy to be here and excited to chat with you.
Awesome. And I'm fired up for this one just with your background and the things that you're doing currently, which we'll definitely get into. But the first question I have for you is, Matt, are you ready to take off with us?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Matt Crevin is with us today. And the first thing I want you to do is just give our audience a background, who you are, what you got going on currently, and just a quick bio of yourself.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Matt Crevin, and I'm the founder of Talkshop. I could add CEO. That sounds sounds so highbrow, and that's not my style. But I am the creator and I'm the founder of Talkshop. And as you mentioned, Jake, it's a series of programs and workshops that I deliver on live and virtually at this point as well for high school students and for college students. The general mission is to really build good, solid communication habits today so they can be tomorrow's leaders, which is just another way to say, let's have more conversations which are going to help them in their family lives, their academic lives, and ultimately to get them career ready. That's what I do currently. The backstory in terms of how I got here is, I don't want to say lengthy, but there's a
Yeah.
story to it. So I'm not sure if you want me to dive into that now or is
Absolutely.
that coming later?
Yeah, you can dive into it. I'm sure we'll hit on it back and forth. So if you want to,
Sure.
just give us the tidbits of it right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm good on tidbits. I love tidbits. There's actually three tidbits, Jake, that kind of brought me to the work that I'm doing with Talkshop. First and foremost, number one is the first job I ever had right out of college, way back when, which the date will remain anonymous. But way back when, I was very fortunate to work as an unpaid public relations intern with the San Francisco 49ers, back when they were relevant. And the lessons that I learned there weren't about the 49ers at all. It was just about being in the business of sports, which is a very unique business. It's different than walking into a corporate
Mm,
job. It just is. But the main lesson it taught me as a young college grad was I needed to have the ability to communicate clearly and confidently with a wide variety of people, regardless of the situation and setting. That line right there is TalkShop's mission statement because
absolutely.
that's what I learned early on, and I bring that into the TalkShop programs 28 years later. So that's what I did, and so just working with the athletes, the egos that are involved with
Mm,
working with athletes, members of the national media. I just again, it was so clear that communication was going to be such a big piece of my success there that I bring that right in, to the programs. The second tidbit that kind of brought me to the work I'm doing is after my internship in 1990-91, I got hired on. I stayed there 92, 1993, right before the 94 season started. I was put to part-time status. The boss's daughter graduated. That's kind of what was behind that. They said, look, we'd like to keep you on our staff in terms of a game day employee. Here I am 28 years later, still involved and have
wow.
maintained that business relationship, which I'm grateful for. But it also put me into a career crossroads kind of, 3, 4 years into, my career. And very fortunate to have worked for some corporations on the large corporate side, which continued my development of how important it is to have conversations, how important it is to listen, how important it is to take feedback and to give it. All of these lessons that I bring right into the TalkShop programs. And in the corporate world, not everyone's a big fan of Microsoft or FedEx on the huge corporate side. So it's not about name dropping. It's about what I learned there.
Hmm.
And Franklin Covey the same. For those that are, have ever read, the famous books that have been out there forever, there's some great stuff in there. And so I bring the best lessons that I've learned during my time working in the training and development space. The third tidbit, Jake, and the most important is I'm a parent myself.
Mm.
I'm a dad. I've got two boys. So they are my case studies, if you will. They'd probably cringe if they hear me say that. But those are the three key pieces of my background that it's not about the credibility it gives me, it's about the practical application. And so that's kind of the background that brought me to this.
Now, what going and looking at your business and the things you do, and what made you choose to focus on those kids, getting them ready for their career? What made you want to work with those kids?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's personal. part personal, as I said. I've got two boys. Um, but it's just recognizing that there's a gap, and recognizing
Mm-hmm.
that gap is substantial. And I recognize that by not only, again, being a parent, but by when I was in my corporate world, I would do a lot of philanthropy and go out and work at nonprofits and just be there. And it was pretty clear that the more and more technology became more and more prevalent in day-to-day life, the real life skill, if you will, of having conversations just dissipated. And so now
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of left us with this, these kids have this high level of apprehension around having a basic conversation, picking up and using their cell phone as a cell phone. And I said, okay, I've seen it. I'm seeing it firsthand. The last, if you will, that proverbial straw that put me into action was I was doing some volunteer work after 8 years of coaching youth sports, which I loved. I started doing some volunteer work at my local high school up here in the Seattle area, and I recognized it, and it just hit me in the nose. And I said, okay, I'm doing something about this.
Yeah.
My background lends itself very well in confidence, not in arrogance, very well to doing this. So it's just recognizing that there's technology is great. It really
Yeah.
is. But it's created this huge gap, and I don't, it's just a personal thing. I don't like it. So I wanted to do something about it and create a solution.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. And it's just that just listening to you talk, it reminds me of myself just talking to our team, just about, hey, put the phone down, hey, get off Snapchat, TikTok. You feel, filters. And like I said, I could. This gets me fired up. I'll be honest with you. But as we go in there, and we both agree, phones aren't going anywhere. Technology is not going anywhere. So what are the effects? There's two things I want to ask you. What are the effects of this app driven world that is causing, I hate saying problems, but at the end of the day, it is
Yeah,
affecting our kids in a negative way? And
right.
what are the steps do we take forward, moving forward, that allow us to help our kids get away from such a app, relying on technology so much?
Yeah. Well, there's so much to say right there. I'm going to answer
Yeah.
the second part first, which is a little unconventional. It's almost if you just tell parents and or tell kids directly, look, do you realize what's at stake?
Mm.
Not as a threat or as a scare tactic, because that doesn't work well with everyone. But what's at stake is their livelihood. You go and do research like I do, whether it's Pew, whether it's any of the reputable job sites, and more importantly, if you go and talk to those that do direct hiring, 90%, if not more, will show you their job descriptions. And within the first top three must haves is going to be communication skills. It's there,
Absolutely.
it's in black and white. So it fires me up that I know I'm on the right spot in my mission. So it's almost like what's at stake. Now, I don't want to miss the first part of your question, so I'm going to have you just rephrase it for me real quick because I know it was an important part, and I
Just
jumped in and I answered it out of
yeah,
sequence. So I apologize.
no, it's what are the negative effects of
Oh,
the
got of social media.
technology? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for see. This is what happens when you get to be a little bit older. No, it's not. You're right. Negative, whether it's a wordplay or not. There's a lot of good things that can come from having the research tools or just the technology tools, right? The good thing is today's kids can communicate with a wide variety of people from every corner of the globe by a few twitches of their thumb. That's pretty exciting and pretty powerful stuff. However, the way they're communicating, and I think the downside, if you want, or the concerns or the issues are that they're communicating rapidly, but that's not the real world in a lot of ways. The depth and the scope of the conversation, the intent and tone is lost. The spirit is definitely lost. And when you have those elements at play, when you communicate only over social media, it's just destined that you're going to have, what do you want to call it, drama, where you're going to have
Hmm.
issues, concerns that are just going to mushroom cloud over time because people just, whatever, that was just John, my buddy down. No, it's people are quick to dismiss. And the way they talk and communicate online is ripe for issue. For example, let me just hammer this home. It would be so easy for me to text you, Jake, use foul language, speak my mind in a vulgar way, not only just in the language of my intent, and I could be angry at you and mean spirited, all of those things, because it's just a few clicks of my thumb or tapping on a keyboard. It's easy. Would anyone talk to someone else that way if they were face to face? No, it doesn't happen. So those are the issues that I think are at the core for me that when you peel it back, that's not making society productive. Sorry, that's just my opinion.
And I think you're right. It's like I tell our kids, guys, it's easy to sit behind a screen. anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Reiterating what you said. And where I want to go to next is because one of the next things I see in this society is just as a teacher, and you have kids either write or type whatever they're doing an assignment, they're writing and typing just like they're texting.
Exactly.
It's like they don't know the difference. And then when you
Yeah.
grade it and you're like, well, that's how I talk, and I'm like, well, this isn't correct. It's one of those deals. And so do you believe that's from that society, that social media app driven is, or because I know nobody's teaching that. So how do
I
you
do believe that. I do that to believe. I believe that to be true. Can I say it's categorically across the board? No, because that
mm,
wouldn't be fair. But as a broad stroke general statement, yes. And to back that up, I can only use my two kids as a clear example, but I use the kids that I work with day in and day out because social media that's just the form. You're not even spelling words out. It's acronym after acronym, emoji after emoji, whatever it is you want, however you communicate, then it becomes so part of who you are, the day-to-day fabric of who you are as a communicator, that when it comes time to talk with a teacher or a coach or someone else, a parent, a relative, an uncle, whatever the case might be, it's so void of detail, supporting detail. The way you communicate verbally, if you're going to write, I mean, just think of a term paper. Sorry, let me date myself, but writing a research paper, you've got to have a little more depth to be able to explain your thoughts in detail. I can't tell you, but this is probably the most common comment that I make, not only as a parent, as a coach, a career coach, etc. Tell me more. Tell me more about what you mean. Tell me more about that because there's just, hey, can you share more detail? So again, I want to go back to your first question, and I don't mean to be all over the place, but there's a direct translation of the way students today, young students, emerging adults are communicating online it's created a huge apprehension to have a live conversation, an easy one or a hard one. And hard ones are already hard enough to have. But what it's done, I think you asked this earlier, and I wanted to come back to it for just a second, is all of this cyber craziness, if you will, the scrolling and the app-driven society, and kids come home from wherever they are, and they immediately get on a device or a computer or laptop, and they start scrolling to catch up on the grind, whatever they call their grind, right? The Instagram, Snapchats of the
yeah,
world. And it's created, attention spans are already low as it is. And I'm going to ask you this, Jake, just as it for fun, because I do this in my live workshop. Say, hey, you don't want to take a guess what all of this internet scrolling, this data on our phones, what all this has done in terms of our attention spans? Does anyone want to take a guess as to what researchers um, put our typical 15 to 18-year-old attention span? Do you want to take a guess, Jake, just for fun?
I'll go 12.
9 seconds.
Jeez.
And I always say, look, show of hands, who here just finds that really scary? And there's not a whole lot you can do in 9 seconds in life. You're not going to win a debate, although our kids think they can. You're not going to, convince your teacher that or your coach that you need more playing time in 9 seconds. Not a lot you can do in 9 seconds. So there's attention spans that are at stake, which is dovetails to why we don't listen. There's a lot to this. So anyway, I'm going to stop for a second and let you ask the questions, but you can see I've got a lot of passion about what's really
Absolutely.
at stake here. That's the key thing is, look, we know all of these pieces are in play. What can we do about it?
And that's what talking about this, with COVID and everything. I know in our school now everybody has a laptop. So
Right.
that technology, here you go, here you go. And it's made things a lot easier for us as a teacher. Like might be the first. I've done it for 8 years. I haven't printed a class copy of anything off all semester because of computer. But at the
Right.
same time, there was one day I said, you know what, close your computers and let's talk. Just forget the
Yeah.
computer, because I'm passionate about where we're going with this. And uh, it scares me just how much technology is being just fed to them. And then what's going to come of this 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road. And that's
Yeah.
just something like luckily people like you are out there that are trying to fight this and go. I say fight it, but show the importance of what communication can be. Now, I love what you mentioned a minute ago about listening. All right. And as I was prepared for this, I love listening to several things about listening. How powerful is listening in your opinion?
Extremely. That's just the first word and the only
Yeah.
word. It's extremely
Yeah.
important. And I always, again, I'm giving you kind of some some tidbits, if you will, of kind of how I
Yeah.
workshop this. And whether it's with parents during parent orientation sessions that I deliver, or with students that are high school or college age, I always say, look, quick question, show of hands. And my stuff is very interactive. My workshops are really collaborative. It's not just a lecture. So I ask questions and get them talking about what's going on in their world and their headspace. And I say, hey, quick show of hands. Who here likes to be understood? And of course, Jake, would you say you like to be understood?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
And then I carry on and I say, look, what do you think it takes to be understood? And then it dovetails into, what do you think it takes for you to understand others? What do you think it takes for you to be understood? It all hones right into listening. And listening is hard. It
Yeah.
always has been hard, but it's harder now because we've got attention spans that are this much, 9 seconds. We all just want to interject our thoughts and opinions, and we're really not listening to what a question might be, which might enrich a conversation. It might create more depth. So listening is paramount. It's critical, but it's the hard part. Talking is the easy part because we're just repeating what we already know in our head. Listening takes patience, and it's harder to do because we just don't have the attention span, and we're not willing a lot of times to put in the work. We just want to voice our opinions and turn and move to the next.
And when going into that and you're talking about the listening, why do you believe it's so hard for this society to just say, "Hey, I need to be quiet and listen," especially with everything going on in the world? We just got through with the presidential election. We're not going to go into politics, but you just sit there and you think about to yourself, man, why don't you just listen to one another? Neither side wants to listen, etc. Why is that so hard for people today to do?
I don't know the answer to that specifically, but I think I'm just going to repeat in a way and repackage what I
Mm,
said, because I think generally it's just human nature to do things that are easy, and we'll avoid things that are hard. Listening is hard because it takes patience, it takes some skill to just stop talking, truly actively listen to someone else. I've been lucky to have been groomed in a way where, let's just use my work with the 49ers, for example. I'm in front of a live, hot, open mic for 3.5 hours
yeah.
on any given Sunday. I'm watching the action as it unfolds in real time, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret that's really not much of a secret. But anyone that does any type of announcing, or if you watch your local news or your national news, you'll see the news anchor. He or she will have an earpiece in their ear. And in there, or in the earpiece, is going to be that person's director telling them, hey, we got to go to break. 5, 4,
Mm,
3, 2. Someone's in their ear as they're talking. It's a really challenging environment. I'm on headset, and I'm on headset to the chief statisticians saying, hey, that was a 47-yard punt, 13 yards on the return. They generate that information in about 2 seconds, where it would take me about an hour to make that calculation. I've got to pause and listen to them before I make my announcements. It's awkward sometimes for people to be silent, so that might be part of why listening is hard. They just want to only voice their opinions. They only want to talk and make sure that they get their information out, and you be damned, so to speak. Like, I don't really care what your thoughts are. I think there's a lot at play in society today. I'm not going to go political either because that's
yeah.
not my thing.
Hmm.
But wouldn't it be nice as we all sat and watched, sorry to say, for a lot of people, maybe an embarrassment of people just over talking and not listening and interrupting. And that was on a national scale or on a global scale of, if you just listen and
Hmm.
just react appropriately and then have a conversation from that, where people can go. So
Absolutely. And as we go into your background a little more and you talk about the businesses that you've worked with and consulted with, I want to get into a little bit about communicating, but communicating confidently. What are the characteristics of that? When you talk about, oh, a guy that communicates with confidence, what exactly do you mean?
what I mean by that is, look, being clear and concise and confident are the 3 C's that we go into in depth in my workshops. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm a sports guy, so it's super easy for me to go into sports cliches. And Jake, I know you are, so you'll get it. And anyone in your audience, whether it's men or women, whatever their sport is, or regardless, maybe there's a chef. They don't become a 4-star chef just by getting in the kitchen one night. Those are habits that are built up for someone to prepare a 4-course meal, or for an athlete to be able to improve their 40 time if they're being clocked. You're not going to improve it in one day. These are habits, proper nutrition, proper training. All of these elements are into play. Once you do the same with the way you communicate and you put those habits into place of just being aware to talk in a little more detail, eliminate your filler words, and talk clearly, slow down if you need to, speed up at times if you need to, whatever the case, but just get your cadence down. Those are all the elements, but it's a habit. It's a muscle memory like anything else. That's why I said in the very front end of this interview, what I envision and what Talkshop is building effective communication habits. Because these are habits.
Yeah.
So it comes with practice. I know that sounds it's trite to say it that way, but that's the truth. You just need it. That's why I work with high school kids now. So they have these skills when they get into college, not starting in college, almost too late then. Does that help, or did I
Oh,
miss
no,
that for you? I want to make
absolutely.
sure I.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. And that's what I was just going to ask you. So if we had a workshop and you're with you, how do you go after those habits? Because, and you're talking about high school kids, we're talking about habits of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids.
Mm-hmm.
How do
Right.
you attack those habits? And I know we can say, well, it's just like athletics and things like that, but they don't want to work on that. They'd love to go work and get in the weight room and do those habits. So how do you effectively attack those habits to break them?
Yeah, and that's a great question. No wonder they pay you the big bucks for this program to do that. That's the question. That's the payoff question. I'm going to answer it with a question, kind of a rhetorical question in a
Yeah.
way, but I'll come around because I think the general gist is there. Is I like to ask questions. I
Mm.
love to get the kids talking about what's going on with them. It's easy for me to talk about me, but the workshops are not about me. It's about the students. So in this example, again, it's not a scare tactic. It's just creating a reality check for them. Say, hey, show of hands, because I love that expression. It gets them thinking, it gets them moving. Hey, here's
Yeah.
show of hands. Who here someday would like a job? And of course, most kids raise their hand. And then I say, great. Who here someday would like to have a job that they really, really like? And they all raise their hand. That's what's at stake, Jake. That's a
Yeah.
I had to be careful of that sentence there. It's almost like a rhyme and Simon right there. But that's what's
Yeah.
at stake. Am I going to resonate? Am I going to get through to every single college kid, or pardon me, high school student? No, I don't think that I'm, the student whisperer in that sense. But
Hmm.
and it's hard when you're in high school because that's the bulletproof vest. I wore it too when I was in high school. This doesn't pertain to me. This is no big deal. I'll get there. Great. You can have that mindset, and I'm not here to break them down like a drill sergeant,
Yeah.
but it's the real world. And if they understand it, even if it's just to 1 degree, and I move the dial 1 tick, then I consider that a success because there is a lot at stake when you really boil down to this. They're going to need to get volunteer experience, go out and get internships. And if they don't have this understanding or interpersonal skills or be able to communicate with other or read people's body language even, it's kind of, again, it goes back to what's at stake. So those are the elements that I get to them when I work with them to say, this is why it's important to put these habits into place now. And for those that are athletes in the room, for example, if I'm working with a full intact women's tennis team or a women's gymnastics team or a guys lacrosse team, a boys baseball team, whatever the case, then I can use the sports background in the analogies that are just going to be directly, you're going to hit them right in the chest. Like, hey, look, some of you may become Division I athletes, and some of you may carry on. But for those of you that don't, and that it will happen to a great number of you, so it's just kind of the real world. Let's have some skills that you can lean on. And again, it's the real world of. I don't know if I'm trying to bounce
No,
around
no,
to give you
yeah,
direct
you're right. Yeah, you're going in the right
content as
direction.
to how do you get to a high school kid and how do you get them to understand that this is real and it's real right now. That's my job, and I take it on and I confront it every day, and that's my mission, and that's
Yeah.
something I love to do. And if there's a room of 30, if I get through to one kid, that's a win.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you lead it off the right way by just saying, "Hey, look, this is your future." How many, and this can help you get to your future. And even if you're a Division I athlete or a professional athlete,
Yeah.
especially in your background, if you don't know how to communicate, how the media will eat you alive. And that's just a great example. And it's like I tell kids that want to get drafted, like people are fixing to come into your house and look for a reason not to pay you. So you
Right.
got to be able to communicate with them and things like that. You mentioned boys and girls a minute ago and just the separate teams that you work with. Has there been what are the difference you've seen in female athletes or just females in general and males communication wise?
Ooh, there's all that's just going to happen. Look, I'm a parent to two boys. There's a lot of stereotypes out there, so it's not
Mm,
true. There's a lot of glittering generalities out there. Some of them are accurate, some are not. Um, One that comes to mind as well, I always hear, well, can you work with this group of boys because, they kind of keep to themselves. They don't really, they internalize more. They won't communicate and they won't let emotion come into it. And I love that challenge because number one, that's a competitive piece of me. I like the challenge. And high school girls, they may think that they're communicating with more heart and head versus just black and white. So yeah, there are some just inherent differences, but there are times where teenage girls go through the changes that just happen in teenage girls maybe a little bit differently than it does with boys. So a lot of times I don't separate them. I keep them all in the same bucket. Horrible term, but I keep
okay.
them all in the same category because I look at this as communicating is it's not just for young women and young men. It's to get everybody truly career ready. And career ready for some might be going to work right out of high school. Some may not
Yeah.
go to college. And those that do, great, that's fine too. So I don't look at it. I understand your question and I
Mm,
get it, the spirit of it. But I've never really done the research and broken it down as to how do boys communicate differently. I can share this. I delivered to a group, and I'm not sure I think it's a national organization, something that I wasn't even familiar with literally 6 months ago, but it's called National Charity League. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
mm,
it's a national organization and it's kind of a nonprofit where it's just a girl, I believe it's a girl and mother organization, if I'm not mistaken. And I delivered to 22 girls. And just the way that they communicate, some of them are just like guys, where some will be a little more direct and to the point. Some will beat around the bush. And I say, well, look, what happens if you're not direct, not mean? Mean and direct are two different things. Being direct is just ask your questions. It's okay. You have the right to ask someone a very direct question.
mhm.
But if someone's bothering you, for example, whether it's at home or in a friendship circle, whatever the case might be, is don't be afraid to let someone know
Yeah.
because that's I think the big piece of where maybe boys and girls communicate differently or similarly for that matter is they're just afraid to let their good friends know that something they're doing is bothering them, and that's a big piece. So I'm sorry I kind of bounced and maybe danced, but I see it happen in both guys and girls, and so that's something that kind of came to mind that I thought I'd share.
No, and I think that's awesome because it just goes back some of the time or most of the time when we talk to our guys and we're just talking about being a leader and just talking about holding people accountable. In this day and age, it seems like they don't want to do that because of, like you just said, they don't want to have that hard conversation or they're
Yep.
afraid their peer might not like them tomorrow or just be upset with them. Have you seen anything about just the toughness of our society? And being able, and I'll just read the question here, do you believe the toughness of our society has hurt the ability to communicate? I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I would want to ask a little bit more in terms of what you mean by the toughness of our society to
Well,
really give you an answer.
just kind of like what I'm talking about with holding each other accountable. Me and you, Matt, we're on the same team. Matt, you're struggling. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And instead of me saying, hey, man, you need to do this the right way, or you're not doing this the right way, something that might offend you. Uh,
Yep.
and just because I'm afraid, because Matt, I want you to be my friend. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I can't hold you accountable because I think you might not be my friend after that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for kind
So
of repackaging
yeah.
that. I just want to make sure I understood it. Hey, I like to practice what I preach. Listening is kind of important. This is your program. I want to make sure I'm listening to the host here. Um, Whether you want to call it the toughness of our society or the lack of backbone to confront someone when something's bothering you, there's a lot of factors at play there. So it's a loaded question, but a legit question. And I don't want to make this like a sales pitch if that's not the thing. But one of the modules in my program is how do you have those hard or difficult or challenging conversations. Not in a negative sense, but it's inevitable in life. It's going to come up, whether it's at home, in a relationship, or as you get older at work with your peers, colleagues, management, what have you. Or in a sports term, you may not agree with your hitting coach. You may not agree with your pitching coach or your infield coach, whatever the case might be there, it's going to happen. How do you have conversations where you need to just be direct, but also provide a human touch to it where it's not offensive? And that's, I think, where, to your question, the toughness, I'm going to change that word if you don't mind, to change your question around is, I think technology has created some issues with that. And those are some concerns of mine that I like to address is I think it's easy for people to, in a way, I don't want to say hide, but kind of get behind their screen or get behind their device or get behind their keyboard and tap something away that could easily be misconstrued as mean-spirited, not very thoughtful, disrespectful, hurtful, all of it. But is that the way you communicate with someone face-to-face, as we talked about earlier? No, I think people naturally don't want to hurt someone's feelings. They want you to be friendly with them. You don't want to lose friends. So that's the reason that people will avoid having a hard conversation with someone. It's basically fear-based, fear of how it's going to come out. God, I've never done this, and I'm just not comfortable. It's going to come out wrong, and I'm going to damage the relationship. I'm fearful of what might happen if I say something. So those are all the pieces that we work on of how do you have it, because it's important to have the conversation. It's opposed to just avoiding it, because when you avoid it, people may think it's going to go away, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. It'll mushroom into something else somewhere down the line, and probably even bigger. So did I miss something there, Jake? I want to make sure I come back.
That was perfect. That was right on. It's just like you said, we got to make sure. I think one of the things in our world today, we got to make sure people are open to that tough conversation. There's something about it. I wouldn't say I'm conflict oriented, but at the same time, I don't mind it. And I don't see a lot of people that way today.
Yeah. No, I don't either. And I give, like I mentioned earlier, I give parent education. I call them taste of talk shops, which are really just for parents. So like PTSA organizations, things along those lines. And I'm going to just tell you straight up, that's the module that I use when I work with parents, is the hard, difficult conversation. Because I'll just tee it up, if you don't mind me, just, I'm not going to role play with you here, but I just say, look, hey, give me a show of hands. I told you I like that comment. I say, hey, give me a show of hands. Who here wakes up every morning totally jazzed, totally fired up, psyched to have a hard conversation with someone?
Yeah.
And no one raises their hand, because no one has that emotion. No one feels it. No one wants to have it. And then we get into, well, why is that? And here are some techniques of how do you have that conversation? Again, it's not going to come out perfect the first time, maybe not even the third or fourth time. But the more you work on the habit, the better you become of it. And there's a lot to be said from just you just the weight that comes off your shoulders come back down. Yeah, that felt good. And it is a good thing, not because you're being mean to someone. It's because you're getting something internally that you knew it's been itching at you and gnawing at you, but now you know how to have it. So I'm arming people with some skills that are really, really critical to have, because like I said earlier, it's not looking at life in a negative tone at all, but it is inevitable that it's going to need to know how to navigate conflict.
Yeah. And it's like I try to tell our guys and even our parents, one day you got to answer to a boss, or you got to, or even you like one day when you lead your company, you got to be able to have those conversations. And as we start to wind this up and go through a few other things, the one question I do want you to answer, and this is going along with the parents, and whether it's a coach with kids or just we have several parents that listen to this, what are some effective ways that they can be helping their young kid and their young child communicate better at a younger age and just steps throughout?
Ooh, yeah, I wish that I had the magic wand. I get a lot of those questions. They're all fair and legit. I don't carry a magic wand in my back pocket, but some things that come out, just my gut instinct. You got to pick your spots as parents. I know my spots when my kids feel ready and relaxed to have conversations. So I think as parents, we know what those times are. And it's for us to get a little curious, not just to be satisfied with our teenagers that are just being teenagers. They're going to push the envelope because that's their job when they're teenagers, just to see what they can get away with. And more importantly, do the minimal amount to get away with something. I just say, ask more questions. Simple questions like, hey, I'm really interested in, but tell me more about that. How's that? Or questions that bring some human emotion into it. How did that make you feel? If you said, hey, I heard your teacher gave you some feedback. Was it good, bad? How did it make you feel? Asking a little more questions that are open-ended, or whether regardless, are always going to be
Yeah.
beneficial. Again, as a parent, it's not going to work every time. Be prepared for that. It's like, when you're trying to feed a toddler vegetables for the first time, do they eat it right away? No, never.
Yeah.
What's the sequence? It takes a lot of time. You got to put that work into it. That's what I suggest parents. But I think parents too, and I'll raise my hand and own it. But there's a lot of times that I will slip and I will get lazy and just go, okay, I'm going to do path of least resistance right now because I need to move on to 3 other things that I know I got to get done. But when I do that, when I see myself getting into that, and it happens to me all the time too, I'm clearly nowhere near perfect. I say, okay, stop, time out. Now's not the time to get lazy on myself because my kids are my focus.
Yeah.
So sometimes I catch myself. It happens a lot. Jake, I'm not sure if look, there's no magic wand to this,
Yeah.
but it's finding the time to have the conversation. And when the kids are willing to talk to you, no matter how busy we are, take the time to listen. I think that's the biggest thing. Listening, and a lot of it comes back to that. As parents, we want our kids to communicate with us, and then when they're ready, then we tune out. We don't want to listen. What is that showing? What kind of leadership quality is that showing? Anyway, there's a lot to that, and I could spend the next hour probably just on that topic alone. But
well,
we
might have to get you back for that one then. But
I'm
right there
look,
with
a lot
you.
of it is what you model,
Yeah.
at home or in your apartment, which your living situation is. It's what you model, and the kids look at that, whether we think that they're looking at us or not. They're observing everything we do. When they're in the other rooms, they're still seeing the way and hearing the way we communicate at home, on phone calls that we have, on Zooms that we're doing. I think, a lot of that is how we model it at home too.
Yeah. And that's right on, because one thing and I wanted to ask you that because
Yeah.
I have kids that come to mind that I feel like I know that's what's going on in their life more than their parents, and then when you ask them, well, why don't your mom or dad know this? And they're like, well, they won't listen. Or every time I try to tell them something, they're jumping down my throat, etc. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, what are some things that help you learn more about communication? Just for our listeners here, some resources that I know you mentioned, some books, and we're fixing to get to Talk Shop here in a minute. Just what are some other things that you dive into that help you learn, or more as just help you communicate better?
I want to be shameless and say it's what I do, because I learned that was an easy answer. Can I just go back? I want to come back to that question. I'm sorry, Jake, I can't take it. I got to just make one quick comment on your previous comment, because you yourself as a coach, you see this, and my heart aches a little bit when I hear it, but it's real. Like the kids, your kids, your ball players will come to you and talk to you because you're their coach.
Mm-hmm.
You're not their mom. You're not their dad. And for me, I see a lot of the same. And I enjoy working with the kids because they're not mine. And you know what? I could be saying and reinforcing some of the same habits throughout my programs that they might be hearing at home, but because I'm not their parent, because I'm not their coach, because I'm not their tutor, it resonates. So there is something to be said for that. Sorry, I just wanted to add that. It's more of a mindset for me, Jake, to answer your question that you just asked. For me, I just have the mindset of learn or die. I know that sounds really drastic and brash, but
Love it.
look, at 54, I don't know everything, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But it's a mindset for me that I want to always continue to learn. If I just take away one nugget a day, then I'm good. For example, this morning, what is today? I've lost track of what day it is. It's a Monday. Sorry.
You put me on the spot.
I was doing some research because I always like to check in and do some research. So for me, that was my little component of learning today. I like Pew research. I like studying, what universities do, because they've got the funding, if you will, to go out and do research. And the research is all public. And today I was doing some research for my own knowledge. I always want to learn, because how I can directly relate real-time stats that are out there in the world to what Talkshop, the deliverable. So just to give you an example, that's the way it's a mindset for me. It's not just a book that I have on my bookshelf. Yeah, I've got all sorts of books, but it's staying relevant on research that I know that it's valid and it's a reputable source. And today I was researching 2021, what companies are looking for in college hires.
Wow.
Just that alone. Now, a lot of it I already knew, but some of the stats change. I know you'd be surprised for me to tell you, based on you knowing what I do now, interpersonal communication skills is going to be number one, two, or three on almost 90% of hiring managers' to-do lists or
Wow.
required pieces.
Yeah.
So sorry, it's not just one book that I can say, hey, Jake, read this book and it's going to
Yeah.
solve everything. I've got a ton of books that I could reference, but it's a mindset for me. So that's my answer.
But your mindset is what drives you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Whether it's not that's your motivation, and that's
Yeah.
perfect. And I love that quote there, learn or die. Now let's talk about Talkshot real quick, and just tell us the broad spectrum. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, get more info with you, talk about whether it's a school setting, team setting. Just go into it for us real quick and give our listeners a background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm just kind of repeat the mission statement first and foremost, because to me, that's like starting with what's the end goal in mind. The end goal is to work with high school students and college students, two completely separate programs, but at the end of the day, at the core, it's providing them and building effective communication habits so they can communicate with clarity and with confidence, regardless of the situation or setting. That's what the programs are all about. The high school programs are not really delivered within the high school framework. A lot of them are delivered outside of the traditional high school framework. So, for example, a sports team where there's booster funds available, if you will, not to get into the financial piece, but I just want to make sure I am clear that working with it within a high school curriculum, I should say. That word came out a little muddled. But working with sports teams, working with nonprofits, boys and girls clubs. I mentioned National Charity League. Those are just a few of the people that I partner with. So it's PTSAs are huge. The college program, it's called Lasting Impressions, and it's all around how can college students truly create a game changer for them. Not to speak in sports terms, but I'm going to a game changer in today's world more than ever. If you can articulate who you are with confidence and clarity, that will be a huge differentiator in terms of your job networking process, your job search process, and your interview process. If someone is going to articulate who they are and the value that they bring to an organization better than another one, that's the person that's going to get hired. And that's the program that's the program in essence. So two different programs. I can't wait till we can deliver these back live again right now. My
Absolutely.
college program is delivered one-on-one because there's such a high level of customization. The high school programs are delivered virtually over Zoom. Great for teams that are looking to get some team build activities going on in this time where just people can't meet. This is a great time to double down on life skills that are going to prove beneficial not only now but the rest of their lives. So people can find me. The link or the website is a little unique, so I'll say it twice, but it's talkshop.company. It's not .com, so it's www.talkshop.company. Anyone that wants to reach out, email, phone call, I'm always willing and will make time to get on a phone call anytime to talk with parents, educators, coaches, anyone that's interested to learn more. I'm happy to share an exploratory chat anytime.
So how many workshops is it? Is it just one big one, or is it several throughout a couple of weeks? How's the program work?
Yep. For the high school program, I never like to be one and done, just to use the March Madness
Mm-hmm.
term or the NC2A basketball term. In a perfect world, I don't mandate this, Jake, but in a perfect world, if I can deliver a couple of workshops in a 9 month period, just a traditional school year, if you will, I think that's great. So, for example, one in the fall and one in the spring, then the students do some work in between, collect some data
Mm-hmm.
points, and deliver again. But I don't mandate that. I want to be a long-term resource for people whenever they'd like to get in small groups of 5 or bigger groups of 25, if it's a full team, for example. More than once is great because the retention, the sustainability of it, I think it's better served if you can do it more than once. So 2 to 3 times in a calendar year is ideal. The college program is just again can be delivered in group workshops, but the one-on-one are just hourly sessions up to however many they feel they would like. There's no People don't need to commit and lock themselves into some long-term contract, if you will.
Yeah.
It's really kind of what they feel that they need. So does that help give you kind of
Absolutely,
a feel
absolutely.
for it? Yeah.
Because I think what you're doing is awesome. I think it's something that, as leaders and as whether you're over a company or a team, I think it's something that needs to be addressed because it's a skill that's lacking. It's a lost art almost to say. And I love what you're doing, because I know, like, our mission statement, yeah, I want to win baseball games, but I got husbands, I got fathers, brothers, sons, future business owners that are going to make a huge impact in this world. And I want to tell our people and our listeners that they need to go out, research and look you up, and because you're doing some awesome things just from what I've seen. And I'm looking forward to talking with you more and getting more information on it as well. But
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here, and we can, again, talkshop.company is the website. For those that are LinkedIn users, you can find me as Matt Crevin, or you can look up Talkshop. If for those that are Facebook users, there's a Facebook page. The only reason I'm kind of promoting that is there's a lot of content, Jake, that I put out there. My
absolutely.
video interview series is there, which is great for high school students to start looking at. Definitely good for college students to start looking at. A lot of it is sports industry related, so it'll resonate with athletes, boys and girls alike. So those that connect with me on LinkedIn and my Facebook Talkshop page will benefit, because I put a lot of good content there. So just thought I'd share that.
Absolutely. And Matt, I appreciate you giving up your time during the holiday season. Love what you're doing. Look forward to talking with you more. And I appreciate you for taking off with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate what
Thank
you're doing as well.